Hey guys, just finished charging up this beautiful 2023 Cadillac Lyriq rear wheel drive. I'm gonna hop out onto the highway now, drive at a constant 70 miles an hour. We're gonna see how far the Cadillac Lyriq goes in the 70 mile an hour highway range test. All right, so I'm out on the New Jersey Turnpike, cruising along at 70 miles an hour in a 2023 Cadillac Lyriq. This is the rear wheel drive Lyriq. They also make an all-wheel drive version. The rear wheel drive that I'm in has 340 horsepower, 325 pound-feet of torque. That's good enough to propel the vehicle from 0 to 60 in about 5.7 seconds. Certainly not made for the drag strip, but more than enough power to get out of its own way. If you opt for the all-wheel drive version of the Lyriq, that has 500 horsepower and 450 pound-feet of torque. That'll knock more than a second off of its 0 to 60 time. Somewhere around 4.5, 4.6 seconds is what I'm seeing from some of the other news outlets that's officially tested it. Now, this version here has an EPA range rating of 312 miles. The all-wheel drive version is a little less, 307 miles. So to me, that's definitely only a 5-mile range penalty to get that extra motor, the extra power and everything. That'd probably be the one that I would have selected if I were to buy a Lyriq. But we're rated at 312 miles here. That's the combined EPA range rating. Typically when we do these 70 mile an hour highway range tests, we don't meet the combined range rating because that combines city and highway. The city is always a higher range rating than the highway would be. The unfortunate thing is the EPA hasn't been breaking out the highway and city figures like they used to. So I don't have the highway range rating for this, just the combined number of 312. I would suspect that the highway range rating would probably be somewhere around 280-ish. So I think that's kind of what I'm expecting to get here today, 280, 285, but we'll see. It's got a big battery pack. We have a 102 kilowatt hour of usable energy in this battery pack. So more than 100 kilowatt hour, and I'm going to try to use every last bit of it. The only other thing I want to mention about the vehicle is this has the 20-inch split 6-spoke alloy wheels. There are optional 22-inch wheels, but the person that I got this vehicle for today, I actually rented it from a friend who just got it about 3 weeks ago, has about 2,000 miles on it. So I rented it for the day to do this range test. And he didn't get the 22-inch wheel option, just the 20-inch regular stock wheel and tire combo. It does have the AKG 19 speaker sound system, which so far has been sublime. All right, let's talk a little bit about what I do when I do these range tests to set the vehicles up so it's fair. First of all, I always set the tire pressure to the manufacturer's suggested tire pressure. In the door jamb, you'll find that. And in the case of the Lyriq here, it was 42 pounds per square inch. So I set it to 42 pounds per square inch, all 4 tires perfectly. You will notice that I'm waving my hands around. That's because I have GM Super Cruise on. So far, it's been very good. So I can have hands-free. It is a hands-free system, so don't freak out if you. Sometimes I think when I did the Ford Blue Cruise video, the hands-free system, I had a lot of comments, people saying, keep your hands on the wheel. This is designed to be hands-free, so relax, it's safe, I'm watching the road. So we did the tire pressure. We always put the vehicles in the most efficient driving mode that there is, and with the Lyriq, that's Tour mode. There's 4 driving modes: Tour, Sport, Snow, Ice, and then My mode. My mode lets you kind of configure your driving mode to the way you would prefer it, and if I own the vehicle I might do that, but not on a one-day rental. So Tour mode's the most efficient. We have it in Tour mode. I set the climate control to somewhere between 68 and 70 degrees depending on what makes it comfortable. I have it set to 70 degrees here today, and on fan setting 1, which is the lowest fan setting. I'm trying to use as little amount of energy for climate control, but I also want to keep myself comfortable in the cabin, and we do this with all the vehicles we drive on these range tests so we can compare them. Reset the trip gauge right before we took off. I check my wind apps. When I started off, there was a 5-mile-an-hour wind coming from the north, which aided us because we're driving south on the turnpike. So it's going to help us a little bit in the beginning of the range test, but 5 miles an hour is not much. I like to do these range tests with it under 10 miles an hour because I've noticed once we get up over 10 miles an hour, it really makes a noticeable difference in the range and the consumption rate. But what we do to try to offset that is I drive in long loops up and down the New Jersey Turnpike, and I always try to finish up where I started off, and that sort of negates or helps to negate elevation changes. Although the New Jersey Turnpike is very flat, very little elevation change on the course that I drive here. I do all the vehicles on the same course, but I can't control the wind. That could be different from day to day, and that's why I do these loops, so that if I'm getting a headwind in one direction, I'm getting a tailwind in the other. Hopefully it helps to balance it out and make it as even as possible and as fair when we compare these to other vehicles as possible. As for temperature, when we started off today, it was in the high 60s. I started nice and early this morning. Temperatures are supposed to get up into the mid to upper 70s, so it's perfect range weather. It's not too windy. The temperature's great. We DC fast charged her up, so got the battery nice and toasty warm. So we're good to go. And I'll check in when we're at 75% state of charge, and we'll see where we're at. Checking in at 75% state of charge. At least I think it's 75% state of charge. One of the things that bothers me so much about GM vehicles is they don't have a numeric state of charge display in the vehicle. I think you can get that in the app, but since I don't own this vehicle, I don't have that app. So it's really frustrating. They just give you this bar graph where the bar slowly erodes as your range goes down. But I think I figured out a way to work around that and get a relatively precise measurement. One of the things that the Lyriq does, and I really like this, and the GM vehicles do this very well, is they display the energy usage on your trip. So I'm able to see how many kilowatt hour we've used during this trip. And I know we have a 102 kilowatt hour battery pack. So I'm just going to knock off 25.5 kilowatt hour for each quarter of the range test. And I figure that should land us right at the 102 at the end. Now there could be slight degradation, even though the vehicle is pretty new. It's probably been DC fast charged a bunch because he does put this vehicle on Turo, but it's only got 2,000 miles. It can't have that much battery degradation. So I'm hoping to get close to the full 102 kilowatt hour of usable that GM says. So I stopped at 25.5 kilowatt hour used, and we're at 78 miles driven, and that's fantastic. That tracks for more than 300 miles of range. I'll be very surprised and very happy with the Lyriq if this goes more than 300 miles at a constant 70 miles an hour. Now the wind has died off a little bit. I'm noticing from the first time we checked in, it's only 3 mile an hour wind now, and it's still a tailwind for us. We haven't turned around yet, but that could be helping us a little bit. And our consumption rate so far is 3.0 miles per kilowatt hour, which is pretty good for a vehicle of this size traveling at 70 miles an hour. All right, so our next check-in is going to be at the halfway point when we're at 50% state of charge. Hopefully we're going to be at around 150 miles traveled at that point, but time will tell. We'll see you then. So we're halfway home at 50% state of charge. At least I think it's 50% state of charge. I had to rethink my plan on using the energy usage to tell me how far we've gone, because I forgot for a second that that's going to add back regen. So we should finish up with well more than 102 kilowatt hour used, because during this trip we don't use a lot of regen because it's pretty much a constant 70 miles an hour, but the braking does happen here and there, and it does recuperate some energy. So we're going to finish up, we should at least finish up with more than 102 kilowatt hour. So I can't really go by the energy usage. I have to use this bar here, and when the bar ticked down to where it looked like it was at the 50% state of charge point, we had used 53 kilowatt hour. I was going to check in at 51, which is 50% of 102 total kilowatt hour, but looks like we regenerated 2 extra kilowatt hour of usable energy. So with that, the first 25% check-in, when we did that at 75%, might have been slightly off. I probably should have driven a little bit further, but the fact of the matter is the quarterly check-ins really don't matter that much. What matters is the final result and how far we've gone. I just like to note where we're at 75%, 50%, and then 25%. So at 50%, from what I believe is 50%, we drove 168 miles. That would be 90 more miles than when I checked in at the first check-in after driving 78 miles from 100% down to what I believed was 75%. Now from 75% to 50%, we went 90 miles. So we're tracking at well more than 300 miles total for this 100% down to zero 70 mile an hour range test. And we've used 53 kilowatt hours, so we're definitely going to drain more than 100 kilowatt hour out of this battery today for sure. Looks like we might get up to 104, maybe even close to 105 by the time it's pretty much dead and won't go any further. I need to leave a little bit of energy in the battery to make it to the charging station, but I'm usually pretty good with timing when I get off the highway so that we pretty much plug in when the battery's just about fully exhausted. So there's one other thing I wanted to mention. I think I forgot to mention before when I talked about what we do to set the vehicles up. One of the things I also always do is make sure that the speedometer is correct. So I have a couple GPS apps and I test the speedometer when I set it to 70 miles an hour with the GPS apps, and with the Lyriq it was dead on. That's usually not the case. It's usually 1 or 2 mile an hour off, but the Lyriq's dead on. 70 miles an hour is a true 70 miles an hour. So we have the Super Cruise clocked in at 70 miles an hour and we're cruising along. We're super cruising along. It's been working great. The only thing I will say is it doesn't like merges. When lanes merge, it disengages. When there was a construction zone that we went through, there really wasn't anybody working, but there was cones and stuff set up. It knew that there was a construction zone and it didn't want to drive through it because there was a lane shift and some concrete barrier set up. So it disconnected. And I'm also getting this frequent message that keeps popping up that says one of the cameras isn't functioning. So, but it's working. It's not shutting down. When I had my Tesla Model 3, I would get that a lot if a camera was blocked. Sometimes if it was a really sunny day and it was shining on it, it would happen, or if raining and the camera was blocked. But the cameras are cleaned. I cleaned them before I started this test. It's not particularly sunny. The sun's actually just coming out now. It's an overcast day today, but a perfect day for this range test. Couldn't have scripted it any better. The wind is like non-existent. It's like 2 miles an hour now, and it's 75 degrees. It's perfect range weather. The turnpike's nice and clear. I haven't really had to slow up or anything, so we're just chugging along at 70 miles an hour. We went 168 miles on the first half of the battery. Let's see how well we do on the second half. This video is powered by Qmerit, North America's leading provider of installation services for electric vehicle charging, home energy storage, and other electrification technologies. See how Qmerit is making the energy transition easy for home and business owners by following the link in the description of this video. All right, well, we just passed the 25% state of charge point. We've gone 248 miles. So that's 80 more miles. Now, as I said earlier, I'm not really being precise with 75, 50, 25 like I usually am because we don't have a numeric state of charge display. So they could be off a little bit. I think we're averaging right around 82 miles per 25% of battery. And if we continue on this last quarter with the same consumption that we've been doing, we should hit between 325 and 330 miles. We're going to blow past the EPA range rating. That's pretty much a fait accompli at this point, 312 miles. We're going to crush that. But one thing I have noticed is the GPS now in the Lyriq is telling me we won't make it. We're about 70 miles away, and it's saying we're going to arrive with -1% battery. So should be an interesting final hour of driving. Hopefully it won't be a repeat of the only other time that I ever ran out on a range test with another GM vehicle, the Chevy Bolt EV, and partially because I didn't have a good numeric state of charge display to really judge how far I was. The range rating, the estimated range rating, you can't really rely on that. Not as much as you can a numeric state of charge, as far as I'm concerned. And I just don't understand why General Motors won't put it in their cars. They don't have to put it front and center. If somebody doesn't want it, they can turn it off, or should be in a setting that they can enable. And if they want to have, remaining range, that's fine. Even that bar graph, if you want, that shows like it kind of mimics a fuel gauge on a gas car. Maybe General Motors thinks their customers are more comfortable with what they've always been used to. That could be the case, but give us a numeric state of charge also. That's another useful tool in your toolbox when you're trying to judge how far you can go. So, okay, we passed the 25% state of charge point, 248 miles. We are at 3.0 miles per kilowatt hour again. It's been bouncing between 3.0 and 3.1 for a while now. It just so happened at the 25% point, it was at 3.0. If I would have taken a picture 5 minutes earlier, it was at 3.1. So we're going to finish up somewhere at either 3.0 or 3.1 miles per kilowatt hour. And at that point, when I believed we were at 25% state of charge, we had used 79.5 kilowatt hour on this trip. Now, we should have been at somewhere around 76 if we didn't have regenerative braking adding back some energy into the battery pack. So it looks like we've added around 3 kilowatt hours of extra energy, and that helps you on a long drive. As I said, when I do these range tests, I don't use braking too often. It's pretty much constant 70 miles an hour, but I do have to slow down when I do my turnarounds. So at those points, we definitely use regenerative braking. And here, this is interesting. I'm on Super Cruise. Someone's trying to merge with me, and Super Cruise is not letting them. So he's probably not happy. But in any event, that one thing I will note with Super Cruise and with Blue Cruise that I have on my Ford F-150 Lightning, it doesn't do vehicle merges well at all. And I think it kind of ignores the car that's trying to merge in with you and just goes on its own way. And if the person's a little ahead of you, they kind of expect you to slow down for them. But that the Blue Cruise and Super Cruise won't do that. It just keeps going to the point where it'll like push the person off the road if you let it and you have to take over. I had to do that once or twice. But other than that, the Super Cruise has been working great. Super, rock solid. It's not ping-ponging in the lane. I haven't had any phantom braking issues. I do have that warning that keeps coming up that's saying a camera is not available, but it doesn't seem to be affecting the system at all. Everything's working great with it. So going to continue on to the Electrify America charging station in East Brunswick, New Jersey. Hopefully we'll make it, and we're going to be at more than 320 miles for sure. We might even get just a touch over 330, let's say. I'm super impressed with the Lyriq. If anybody is concerned about getting a Lyriq for range reasons, don't be. This is a range beast. More than 300 miles at highway speeds. Granted, 70 miles an hour, some people drive faster than that. We really can't in New Jersey drive that much faster than 70 miles an hour. There's a lot of traffic. And the speed limit is 65, by the way. But the flow of traffic, as you can see in the fast lane, keeps passing me. The flow of traffic is probably around 75 miles an hour, the fast lane flow. The slow lane that I'm in is right around 70 miles an hour. Sometimes 72, 73, cars pull away from me. Let's say you were on a road trip and you wanted to drive faster. You wanted to drive 75 miles an hour. So, let's say we finish up with 325 here today. I'd feel comfortable saying at 75 miles an hour, you could probably get 380, 385. But once you get up to 80, 85, you're really going to see a big reduction in range because the wind resistance, has an exponential effect on the aero drag, and you really start to slow down. I would think that if I drove this at 80 miles an hour compared to 70 miles an hour, it would definitely lop off 50 miles of driving range. That's how much of a difference it can make, a huge difference. So if you do, in any electric vehicle, go on a long road trip, and you're really trying to maximize your range, you're trying to squeeze out as much as you can, just knock that cruise control down a few miles an hour. You'll get to where you're going. It might take you an extra 20 minutes or a half an hour to get there, but you'll get there. It's even safer to drive a little bit slower, and you'll save a lot of energy and you'll make your destination. But on these 70-mile-an-hour highway tests, we like to just lock it in, so that way we can compare EV to EV on the same course in relatively same conditions. Temperature can fluctuate, but there's not much we can do about that, but note it. But the temperature today is perfect. It's 76 degrees now, almost no wind, not a lot of traffic. Couldn't be better for the Lyriq, and the Lyriq has taken advantage of it because we are going to blow by its EPA range rating and finish up well over 320 miles. Let's check in when I'm at the Electrify America charging station, and we'll talk about the final results. Okay, so I'm pulling into the parking lot where the Electrify America charging station is. I've been driving in reduced power for the last 4 miles. So I pulled off the highway at 228 miles driven, but we weren't completely dead. So I drove down this one road that I could drive about 50 miles an hour on, not quite 70, but I was able to drive like 50 miles an hour. And now I am in the parking lot, and unfortunately the 350 is being used, so I'm going to be waiting to charge. But let's see what our final numbers are when I pull into the station. I tell you, I'm super impressed with the Lyriq. This thing has a range monster. So that's the station I want over there. There's a Mustang Mach-E plugged into it. There's only 2 350 kilowatt stations here. There's 10 stations. There's only 2 cars charging right now, and a Mach-E and an ID4 are charging on the 2 350s. Neither one should be on a 350 because neither one could accept more than 150 kilowatts. But that's the state of charging today. All right, so let's get back to where we're at now. Okay, in park. The vehicle reads low. Once you get down under like 10 miles of remaining range, as I've harped about before with General Motors products, they remove the remaining range and it just says low. It's ridiculous. Whoever designed this at GM has never driven an electric car. They're clueless. It's mind-boggling to me. You get your estimated remaining range for your whole trip, but then once it gets low, when maybe it's important for you to keep an eye on that, it goes away and it just says low. But that's another reason why I'm not 100% sure I'm at 0. I'm pretty sure I'm at 0. But let's see where we are at. Let me record this. Okay, so we've driven 330.3 miles, and I've used 104.7 kilowatt hour, which is more than what I'm supposed to be able to access. The car is supposed to only have 102 kilowatt hour of usable energy, but that extra almost 3 kilowatt hour was from the regenerative braking. I added some energy back into the system. Plus, there's a little bit more left in here. Maybe there's another kilowatt hour in here. I'm not going to run out like I did with the Bolt EV. I feel comfortable with non-GM vehicles running them down to 0, but not GM vehicles because they don't give you any information that you need to know how low you are. But anyway, end of rant. You can tell I'm not happy with that. But I am happy with the other things that GM gives you. This energy usage is really good information that other companies don't give you. And you can take a look at here. 99% of the energy I used today was from the propulsion, driving and accessories, and only 1%, 1.5 kilowatt hour, was for the climate, which was my air conditioning that I had on today. So pretty much everything went into using the propulsion system. I didn't turn on the massaging seats, which I am going to turn on my way home because 5 hours of driving in long loops and my back's starting to get a little cranky. Let's come over here. We finished up with the efficiency of 3.1 mile per kilowatt hour. So super job by the Cadillac Lyriq. I'm going to put this down now. I'm going to cut into the video now before I wrap things up to discuss the usable capacity of the battery pack on the Lyriq. Now, during the range test, I had mentioned on numerous occasions that the reason why I think we're going to be able to get more than 102 kilowatt hour usable on this range test out of the pack was because we were adding energy back to the pack with regenerative braking, which is the case. However, after driving the Lyriq a little bit longer, I noticed that under very strong regenerative braking events, which wasn't happening during the range test, but if I did a strong regenerative braking event, I could actually see the usable energy on that trip drop by 1/10 of a kilowatt hour. So now that made me rethink what the usable capacity was, because if it was deducting it as I was driving, then it shouldn't be more than 102 kilowatt hour. It should have ended with 102 kilowatt hour if 102 kilowatt hour was the finite usable capacity as General Motors tells us it is. But I don't think that's the case. Now, there's different ways that you could really measure the usable energy on a battery. It's not an exact number. And what I believe General Motors does is they drain the battery aggressively under a lot of stress. And then how much of the usable energy is, they put that out, that's the usable energy. But if you don't really tax the battery, and driving at a constant 70 miles an hour is easy on the battery, it's not a lot of stress, you can actually end up pulling more usable energy out of the pack. And I think that's what happened here. So in reality, the usable capacity for the Lyriq's battery pack is more than 102 kilowatt hours. It would probably be 102 kilowatt hours, maybe in the winter when the pack was really cold, or in the warmer weather. If you took the thing out on a track and were just thrashing it around, you might only get 102 kilowatt hour out of it. But in perfect conditions, 75-degree temperatures, just cruising along, not doing a lot of stress, you can pull more energy out of the pack, which is what I did. I finished up with 104.7 kilowatt hour used, but I'm sure I could have gotten that over 105, maybe even close to 106 kilowatt hour, because there was definitely energy left in the pack when I stopped. As I mentioned, I didn't want to run out and have to get towed. So, you know, under the conditions that I had, a brand new Lyriq probably has 106 kilowatt hour of usable energy. Good on GM for under-promising and over-delivering. Okay, back to the wrap-up now. Fantastic job. In my opinion, 330 miles at 70 miles an hour, and there's probably still 2 or 3 miles left in here. I probably could have maybe rounded off to 333, but I'm not pushing this guy today. I'm not waiting for a tow truck lad. I had to do with the Bolt EV. Hey, you can't complain. Lyriq owners, we crushed its EPA range rating of 312 miles. We blew beyond that. I mean, this, you know, at 330, we went 18 miles further, but I'm sure I could have squeaked out 2 more miles. So it probably could have beat its EPA, combined EPA range rating by 20 miles. That's fantastic at 70 miles an hour. So if you're gonna get a Cadillac Lyriq, if you're thinking about getting a Lyriq, don't be afraid of going on road trips. As long as you keep your speed down, this thing is a range monster. It beat my Tesla Model 3. My Tesla Model 3, when I did the highway range test on the same exact course in very similar conditions, it went 310 miles. So this puppy here can go, and Cadillac did a good job with it. It's comfortable. The sound system's fantastic. There's 19 speakers in here. The massaging seats I'm going to try out really soon. I'm sure they're going to be enjoyable. I like the Lyriq. I think it's a good option at the price that it's at. And next up, we're going to see how well it charges. So I'm going to plug this guy in now and do a complete 0 to 100% DC fast charge test. We'll do some analysis and all that, but that video will be coming up a little bit later. Listen, if this is your first time here at State of Charge, please don't forget, smash that subscribe button so you don't miss any upcoming electric vehicle news and reviews. And as always, thanks for watching.